Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Welcome to this 24th day of morning session of a month-long global festival of oneness to celebrate Adi Shankara Jayanti Utsav arranged by Advaita Academy. Let us start with chanting of a Shanti Patha and Ekashloki Advaita. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Ki Jyotistava Bhanumana Hanime Ratrau Pradipadikum Syadevam Ravideepa Darshana Vidhau Ki Jyotirakhyahime Chakshustasya Nimilanadi Samaye Kindhir Dhiyo Darshane Kintatrahamato Bhavan Paramakam Jyotistadasmi Prabhu. Om. We are privileged to have Adharaniya Babaji Bob Kindler to guide us on teachings on Jivanmukti. Babaji Bob Kindler is the spiritual director of Sharda Ramakrishna Vivekananda Association since 1993, with teaching centers in Hawaii and on the west coast of United States, where he serves as a dharma teacher, a meditation instructor for students and devotees. Recently, Babaji has written a beautiful book called Footfalls of the Rishis, of the Indian Rishis. This handbook of India's timeless wisdom, complete with full color artistic teaching charts, is an expansive and comprehensive resource for students, practitioners, and teachers alike. A work in progress for over 15 years, Babaji Bob Kindler created hundreds of dharma art wisdom charts to express the practical and esoteric knowledge of yoga, Sankhya, Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, Tantra, Yoga Vasishtha, Kundalini, Buddhism, Indian luminaries, and more. These stunning wisdom charts cover the extensive array of topics in spiritual life: food, body, prana, mind, consciousness, awareness, karma, and reincarnation, maya, spiritual practice, samadhi, stages of enlightenment, the bhakti path, integration of the four yogas, and countless others. Each of the 299 full color charts are accompanied by detailed commentary. An extensive glossary of Sanskrit terms is also included. The book is now available in USA, but soon it will be available in India. Honorable Babaji has kindly accepted to take few questions after the lecture. Viewers are requested to type those questions in the question box, and Babaji will take up the questions after the talk. Over to you, Honorable Babaji.
Thank you very much. Very grateful to be able to appear for the second time with Advaita Academy in the second year of this Shankara Festival on 2021. And be able to speak on a topic which was in the title of my last year's class, but didn't get expanded on very much because of the 30-minute time frame. But in an hour and a half here or so, I hope to go deeper into the great teachings of Jivanmukti, and also a Jivanmukta, that is one who's a living, liberated soul. As Shankara posed it in the various scriptures he wrote. And so I think basically to start out, and since I'm rather known for charting the course, I'm going to show you a quick chart that I used a couple of weeks ago here at Shankara's birthday time for a classic called Shankara's Spiritual Brilliance, which can also be seen on Advaita Academy's website. So I think that will get us started, and we'll show you some of the great works quickly. I won't spend time on any of them. It'll be up to all the listeners and the sadhakas and practitioners who are looking on from all parts of the world, I hope, to look at some of the extensive, prolific writings of scriptures. I think I mentioned last year that there are avatars or divine descents who come into the body of different qualities and different intensities. Shankara also, of course, known as one of those. And for him, though, I think one of the facets of his divine descent, which is a description or definition for that word avatar today, is that he also wrote scriptures himself and commented on so many of the great scriptures of the past, the Indian rishis. So in this case, then, he did the same with a whole list of scriptures that are coming to you on this chart that we're about to show, I think. Oh, you just showed it. Well, then we see there that great scriptures like Bhakya-vritti and the scripture called Viveka-chudamani, probably his best known, Prashnottara Ratna Malika, this 1,000 names, Atmagyana Padesha Vidhi, Tattva Bodha, Aparokshanubhuti, Vedanta Keshari, Atma Bodha. That was Upadesha, the famous Bhaja Govindam, Moha Mudgara, Agyana Bodhini, Bodhara, Prapanchasara, the Lalita Trisati Vasya, the Atma Anatma Viveka, the Sarva Darshana Siddhanta, the commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, and the famous Vedanta Sura Sharirika Bhashya. That's a list of most of them that he actually penned, came out of his own divine mind. And all of those are attributed to him, plus a few more. And in many of them, he gives teachings to us on the Jivanmukta, or that great soul who has attained the living liberated status. And so what I would like to do is to show you basically the province of the enlightened, which was a statement that his teacher's teacher Gaudapada used, those beings that are, as Krishna says in the Gita, fit for the Brahman state. I'd like to show you what the Jivanmukta accomplishes in his life, what he has to be aware of. And also, I created a new chart at the end to show you briefly about his various teachings on Jivanmukta, the Jivanmukta, and the Jivanmukti state in the Viveka Chudamani, where he's talking quite a bit there about Jivanmukti and also about how the soul arrives there through the state of mixed sattva and pure sattva, and also seeing through reflections, that's through false superimpositions. So if we could then show the chart a second, and we could show them, yes. This chart here is not something I'm going to take you through totally, but I want to show it again for the teaching that is given in Tantra for the description of Maya, how to understand its characteristics, because we know that in Vedanta, Brahman and its Maya is a very profound subject. So if you're seeing that now, you can see that Maya is, and so the Jivanmukta would need to be able to understand the ongoing processes of the cycles of rebirth and how so many hundreds and thousands of souls get caught on this samsaric wheel. That word samsara or Maya being much related in Vedanta and Buddhism. You can see the second characteristic is that although it's eternal, it's illusory. So immediately we're struck with a kind of dichotomy, something that is, as Shankara was to say in his own scriptures, neither real nor unreal, nor real nor real, nor a combination of both. I think the best word in English for that conundrum is inscrutable, which is how we describe or define Sri Sharda Devi's, my teacher's description of Maya, that it's just inscrutable. One has to, as Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa put it, study it from a distance, never from inside of it or up close, because it tends to pull you in. So, and of course, that's the premise of Vedanta, the Brahman Satya Jagat Mithya phrase that is commented so deeply on by Shankara. So we're finding that if we put eternal side by side with illusory, then it gives us a lot to meditate upon, to do our manana or contemplation on. Third, you can see there that it's insentient. And I think that's if you're stultified, that is confused by the happenings of phenomena around you in the world, as many people are today, so many untoward things happening, so many imbalances, so many evils, and precious little refuge that Shankara himself would talk about. If you could come to these great teachings of Atmagyan, that would be the greatest refuge amidst all those catastrophes and calamities that are going on. But it helps the mind psychologically then to understand that that Maya is not sentient. It's not like, say, the demonic being out to make things go wrong in your life or out to get you kind of thing. It's more like, if you understand that it, and the Jivanmukta does understand this, that this set of phenomena that's rising and falling all the time it isn't sentient in of itself. So that's a great mark of knowledge that the Jivanmukta carries with him, knowing that although it seems to have a light and a consciousness of its own, that's not the case. So therefore, it makes it easier to pierce through it. And then the fourth characteristic of this curtain of nescience or Maya or the cloud of unknowing, basically it's called different things in different traditions, is that it's always transforming and changing. And therefore, the Jivanmukta can understand that. Unfortunately, other beings aren't able to do that, not many of them. So they get pulled into it and begin to take the unreal for the real. Jagat Mithya, they don't know that the world is just an appearance. It's like a sheen of, like a rainbow colors across the sheen, surface of a glass, kind of a sheen there. And that it passes quickly all the time. So by observing it, the Jivanmukta is able to see through these appearances and withdraw from them all the easier. So these are right away rule of thumb kind of teachings in India from time out of mind that have qualified great souls to become living liberated. We know there are beings that are called Videha Muktas, and they've gotten free from all bodies. So they've managed to merge their essence into non-dual reality through the Advaitic understanding. But there are also souls that, though they accomplish that, they still want to come back and help other souls. It's rather like the Bodhisattva ideal in Buddhism. That is this ideal of Jivanmukti. And it's a living liberated state. As I said last year, I think my talk was called sadhana and moksha and Jivanmukti. I think that was the name of the talk last year. Sadhana was the main accent of that talk. And so I talked a lot about spiritual effort in order to uncover the truth of one's being. Well, the Jivanmukta has accomplished that work and has done that, as Shankara likes to say, through discriminatory knowledge. That's the thing that he taught and gave accent to the most of when he was here in the body for just those brief 32 years. So we see that those first 4 characteristics, those first 5 characteristics of Maya are very valuable to be in possession of, and also have been contemplated by these great souls. Maya is also the cause for manifestations. When Vivekananda was here, people were, in 1893 in the West, people were beginning to call Maya illusion, which was already off on a wrong footing. So he quickly corrected that and said, Maya is a statement of fact. It's actually a very beautiful lecture in his complete works called Maya is a Statement of Fact. So what he meant by that, of course, was side by side with the definition that he gave, which changed people's thinking that was just outright illusion, into the presence of name, form, time, space, and causality, or causation, or karma. That's 5 things, an important 5 things, which the Jivanmukta is going to have to come to know is the makeup of this world bewitching Maya, as Sri Ramakrishna titled it. So it causes manifestation, and it does that by being the seed of creation, if you're seeing that chart. It's there at the very outset of things, along with the 3 gunas, which you probably have heard of and heard talked about and explained in the Vedanta and in Samkhya. The 3 gunas are a particular teaching in Vedanta that is specific and special to it. So when the gunas are out of equilibrium, as they say, then you know the game's afoot, as we say here in the West with Sherlock Holmes. And then you have to detect the presence of these various evils or these false superimpositions and be able to pierce through them, see them as illusory. So those first 6 characteristics of Maya, if we could say the tantric adepts really did their work, their homework, much like Lord Kapila did when he came up with the 24 cosmic principles of Samkhya. So you can see those are very valuable to the Jivanmukta. Then 7th is it has no beginning or end, which is sort of similar to saying back to number one, that it's eternal, but it puts a different slant on the teachings, because beings don't know eternity. You can't think in terms of eternity, but they can think in terms of beginning, middles, and ends. And that's why we find in the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna was telling Arjuna on the battlefield about the absence of beginnings, middles, and ends, that there's just one eternal consciousness, and it's existing at all times, undivided and beyond time. It's also a teaching Lord Jesus gave when he was alive in the Middle East, and talking about that very same problem that was in people's minds that they couldn't see through. So no beginning, middle, and end to it was mentioned by him as in the beginning was the word. So when he's mentioning the beginning, what we would think of as Om or AUM, and would describe as waking, deepening, dreaming, and deep sleep in India, Jesus was thinking about that in terms of the word being the origin of all things, and that the Almighty Father, which we would call Brahman in India, had no beginnings, middles, and ends. So that's why he continued on to say, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So that's three different phases of the Word. And of course, in India, we're used to putting that into four phases, what also is beyond the Word. So these teachings from the Tantrists, again, are very valuable. I'm showing you this block of 10 characteristics to kind of set up the teachings of what the Jivanmukta has gone through in order to become Jivanmukti, living liberated, so that we just are not blindsided or caught off guard when we see a great soul like that and cannot recognize that great soul, him or her, as being a Jivanmukta. Then we'll begin to know and understand what they've been through, even here on earth, in order to come up with these great siddhantas, or these great conclusions in these different darshanas of India. Vedanta Siddhanta Nirukti Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagatcha Akanda Rupa Stitir Eva Moksho Brahma Vitiye Shrutayaha Pramanam, is how Shankara himself put it, which means Vedanta Siddhanta, it's the conclusion of the great Vedanta that all is Brahman. Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagatcha, time, space, living beings in the world, all Brahman. Then living in constant recognition of this fact is what is called enlightenment. And the revealed scriptures, Shrutayaha Pramanam, are the sure and certain proof of this fact. So Shankara in the Vivekachudamani says that, and gives it a good basis in truth, and consulting the scriptures, and giving us an answer to a question that many people are still answering nowadays. What is enlightenment? Or is there such a thing as enlightenment? Shankara wasn't anyone to pull the wool over one size. He was always ready to strip the coverings off the gift. The gift being, of course, that living in constant realization of truth, Atman, is enlightenment. So we do have a definition for enlightenment, just like Vivekananda gave us a definition for Maya: name, form, time, space, and causality. So that's Brahman and it's Maya. Now, this block of 10 has a couple other teachings to give it, the last one being maybe the only real positive one as far as Maya is concerned. You can see that it has evolutes similar to it. If you're looking at this whole chart, you can see different teachings on there that are problematic evolutes. Some of them vyasti, they come to the individual minds and to the collective mind, and others called samasti, which are in the very fabric of the creation, or we like to say projection of the universes in space and time. That's called samasti, or cosmic laws. And that's all under the thumb of Maya. And so Again, the word evolute is very, very helpful to us in English. We do have a few words in English that can explain to us well enough the depth and profundity of the Sanskrit, which we have to study and contemplate, meditate on. That's a very important thing. It's even more important than speaking or knowing Sanskrit as a scholar or as a Sanskrit adept would be knowing the meaning of the words and being able to take them into your language, contemplate them, and get free. Pass your time contentedly and be free, Shankara said in one of his scriptures. So therefore, you see the ninth and penultimate of these 10 characteristics. Sorry for taking you so quickly, so deeply into philosophy, but we have to be able to understand a Jivanmukta the way a jeweler understands the value of a diamond, because other beings finding a diamond will underestimate it and give it away like a child for nothing. So if we know and estimate the true value of something, we're called jewelers. Then we're real practitioners, and we can really get at the source and essence of these great souls and meditate upon them. It's one of the, I think, 7 states of mind in yoga, 7 methods of meditation in yoga that you meditate upon an enlightened soul. You could meditate on an ocean of light, of sorrowless light, or you could meditate upon a great soul, and various other ways in which the Father of Yoga allowed us to expand our mind's ability to know Brahman through meditation. So that penultimate one, it supports karma. So that would be an important linchpin, or if you want to call it, coffin nail, depending on whether you're heading towards enlightenment or you're going back down samsara, pragbara, into the stream of souls that are headed for rebirth again and again over countless aeons. All happening, of course, in the mind, not back in time, because that's not long enough. You have to go back into the mind. No time is illusory before you can figure out things like lifetimes. You see that as the value of studying 10 characteristics of Maya, that all these things like time, space, causation are found in Maya. So if you can transcend the world bewitching Maya and become a living, liberated soul, then you can detach from it. And of course, that's Satchidananda, that's all existence, pure. It's all Chit, highest wisdom. And then it's also Ananda, joy. It's called Vilapya Shantim Paramam Bhajasva, Shankara said. Those beings who can dissolve the world bewitching Maya and all its aspects back into the Atman, they enjoy Vilapya Shantim, eternal peace, and Paramam Bhajasva, ecstatic bliss. So the last of those 10 characteristics of Maya is that it can be recognized. So there we have our first really positive characteristic. And that's what the Jivanmukta has done. She has been able to recognize the world bewitching Maya, which is worked into everything, which is hiding in plain sight, as the expression goes here in the West. And they've been able to strip the coverings off the gift, take the wool off the eyes, however you want to pull that, and then look straight upon everything as appearances that are changing constantly, and therefore get to the unchanging substratum, as Meister Eckhart called it, the underlying substratum of all things, lying beneath the appearances of Maya. That's no uncommon or easy feat to accomplish. So that's why our salutations go to beings like Shankara, Govindapada, and Gaudapada, that whole line with their beautiful blend of Shaivism and Shakta Advaitism, I like to call it. So it can be recognized as is a great help for the rest of us too, that we can see it and then withdraw from it. As Sri Krishna Paramahamsa says, never study it up close, but from a distance. I think possibly we could say then that those beings who are body bound and attached to the world are studying it up close. And there could be some very intelligent people doing that and being sucked into it as if changing particles were real instead of, as India has always known, unreal or non-actual, dreamlike, illusory. So I wanted to take you through first his scriptures, which we saw a list of, and then wanted to go through these 10 characteristics of Maya. I think, because I know time runs quickly when one begins to talk about profound things like Dharma and Atmagyan, that I want to make sure I pace myself so that we can actually look into the nature of what a Jivanmukta has accomplished. And as an expert on the subject, Adi Shankaracharya made a list of them in his scriptures. And I want to show you that next. And it's on the right-hand side of this chart. I was having some Babaji Bob Kindler fun, as I like to do with some of these charts. Once you become versatile with some of the Dharmic teachings, then you're probably, how to say, unable to avoid the different teachings of great souls and how they line up next to each other. So in this chart, you see that I put on the left-hand column how Lord Vashishta, one of the mind-born sons of Lord Brahma from earliest times, what he talked about in terms of a Jivanmukta's consistency and attainments. On the other side, straight across, I put what Shankara said about it. Well, we'll leave Vashishta for his birthday. We're celebrating Shankara's birthday now with all joy and celebration in a serious but lighthearted way, as Shankara himself was to say. One of the characteristics of an enlightened soul is this elation and this joy. So if you look just at the right-hand side of this chart, we'll get to kind of one of the meat of this talk would be that what is a Jivanmukta? And like I said, an expert on the subject, Shankaracharya, even liberated when he was young and doing his work throughout his 32 years of life. Again, interesting comparison with Swami Vivekananda's 38 or 39-year-old life on earth. We see that he came up with these points here. His quote there, as you can see, internally, externally, in the sentient and the insentient, everywhere, knowing the self is the basis of all, who has given up names and forms and become one indivisible self, one who lives in that state is surely a liberated one, a free soul, a Jivanmukta. So what are some of the bullet points of that throughout his life, what he realized, I think would then give us some teachings on Jivanmukti. First of all, you see there, enjoys the burgeoning of endless merits. Maybe those watching have heard of Dharma Mega Samadhi, the teaching that Father of Yoga used and which India was aware of, which is this very same thing, the burgeoning of virtues inside oneself. People, let's say virtuous, pious, those words in English come forward, virtuous, pious beings, they're always looking, if they're sensitive, for these virtues to come forth, but they're searching for them outside. There's a story that Sri Ramakrishna calls the musk deer is always running around looking for the fragrance on the wind, not knowing that it comes from its own navel. So in that way, people are running around looking for virtues and various attainments in the earth, which, as we've just seen, is a part of Maya with its 10 characteristics, and they're not finding them so easily, so readily. So it would take a turn inside, or some withdrawal, or some detachment, or some renunciation, or some very powerful, intense devotion or love for the Lord, which is also a part of the Jivanmukta's arsenal of divine weapons. In order for that to come forward and be enjoyed by and possessed by a great soul like a Jivanmukta. These merits just come springing forth, Patanjali says, at a certain time on the way towards Kaivalya. Kaivalya means much like living liberated state, isn't it? Yoga and Vedanta side by side, because when you reach Kaivalya, according to Patanjali, you've reached separation from nature, and nature is Maya, and that is seedless. That is seated, right? We said seated. So you can imagine the elation and the as we were just saying, the deep peace of mind that an illumined soul would experience if they could burn the initial seed of manifestation, of a manifestation that creates 7 worlds, many lokas inside of them, billions of beings, all under the rush, the thumb of Maya, all experiencing birth, life, death, and rebirth as if they were real, when the Atman is beyond all of them and bodiless. So you can see then that burgeoning of endless merits, if that began to happen inside, would be a step, a high step actually, towards Kaivalya. There are 7 steps towards Kaivalya in yoga. So that's one of them. So Jivanmukta has attained that. Next, I have to keep moving on here, is always established in non-dual understanding. There's your Advaita Vedanta and all that it means to the Jivanmukta. How would one be able to attain that highest state of non-dual awareness without having transcended the hub of birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death, which is all there in Maya. So you see maybe then the reason why I showed you his scriptures, then I showed you the 10 characteristics of Maya, and now I'm showing you how she, the Jivanmukta, has reasoned with the mind and sharpened the intellect and ripened the ego and made the non-dual mind, made the dual mind non-dual. So with that, non-dual understanding dawns. Then is ever poised into self in Brahman. According to Shankara, it's a matter of Vacham Nyachatmani Tam Nyacha Buddha Diyam Yacha Chabudi Sakshini. He says you must merge the words into the mind. So you're going to have to consider words, a lot of them coming at you right now, for instance, and take them deep and break them apart the way an electron microscope would break apart a subatomic particle. You have to do this in your mind with intelligence. Your intelligence is that electron microscope in your subtle body. So you have to take words in, break them apart, and then merge them back to their source, which is the mind. Then he says, take those 2, merged into the intellect, take those 3, merge it into the ego. By this time, the ego is a different animal than what you're used to seeing it as. It's now ripened, as Ramakrishna said. It's now pakvahamkara. It's no longer apakvahamkara. And so those 4 then, word, mind, intellect, and ego, get merged into the witness. There's where things get good, as we say. You see, you're detached from Maya, and your ego is ripened, so it's not in the way. And when those 5 things are seen from the witness standpoint, then you merge them into Atman and Brahman. Then he says very beautifully, Brahman is the soul of all. It's the soul of all. So that's where you get to those realizations of I'm Atma Brahma, or Aham Brahmasmi, or the other Mahabhagyas. Finally, or next, experiences freedom even in this world and body. Well, that's really the definition of Jivanmukti, experiencing freedom even while embodied. So if you're free, you can put it the other way. If you're free in the world, in the body, then you will be free after you pass from the body. Disembodied freedom. But it needs to be practiced here, and maybe first attained here and practiced, and maybe tested after that. So that the Jivanmukta is then no slouch, spiritually speaking, can put them on a level with great perfect souls like Nityasiddhas and so forth, like Ramakrishna called Swami Vivekananda the perfect soul, Nityasiddha. So that Jivan Muktahood that they're experiencing has been tested in the fires of the world, and they're free whether they're in the body or beyond it. It's a beautiful thing. It has mastered karma and desires, almost don't even need to say. It's peaceful and impervious to samsara because it's not actually real. It's a dream going on in the collective mind. It's a mass collective mental dream that beings are having. And when they wake up from it, that's called enlightenment, and that makes one a Jivanmukta. Retains no sense of I, me, and mine. Think of beings like Sri Ramakrishna and Ramana Maharshi when you hear a phrase like that. And that's even in their teachings. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that. I think maybe he only knew a few English words, and those might have been a few of them. I, me, and mine. So the Jivanmukta has no sense of that. Once they asked Sri Ramakrishna, "Who are you?" And he said, a new person is meeting and said, "Who are you, sir?" And he said, I've been asking myself that question for a long time, and I can't find any I inside of me. So this is how egoless they have become, which I just described. Words to mind, to intellect, to ego, then to witness. So they're living in the kind of witness state, which is hard for many of us to understand until we actually have an experience of it ourselves. Deep sleep would be the only way that we would be able to relate to it. And we forget most of that when we wake up. Is free of past, present, and future. Trikaladarshi, like Shiva, with this witness of the three phases of time, who sees sameness everywhere and in everything. That's a nice word in Sanskrit, Tulyananda or Tulyatman. Tulya means to see the same in everything. It's like Vivekananda once said, I don't believe in humility and pride and all that. I believe in samadarshitvam, seeing, darshi, seeing the same Atman in everyone. Doesn't matter who they were. It's the same in quality, it's the same in quantity. The only difference is that some people have realized it to a greater extent than others have. Who remains unchanged in pleasure and pain. We know that's called titiksha in Vedanta. It's one of the 6 jewels of the 4 treasures. Sama, Dhamma, Uparati, Titiksha, Samadhana, and Shraddha, isn't it? Leads to Moksha, Mumukshutvam. So you can see the similarity of the word Mumukshutvam to Jivanmukti. It's got that precious word in it. Mukti, Shankara said, is a state that's ever at hand. I remember talking about that last year with my host, Ravi, at that time. And we were talking about the beauty of Shankara's explanation of that. It's a state that's always at hand. And so you just need to strip coverings off it. Coverings that Maya has provided for you to use for that purpose. And you should be wary of that. If you know the 10 characteristics of Maya, then you probably won't do that anymore. The Jivanmukta has given that up. Whose heart is filled with the bliss of Brahman. Like I said earlier, they have this joy. At the same time, sort of difficult to understand combination of seriousness and happiness. They're very serious about awakening souls to a state that they're in, Jivanmukti, and they're very compassionate to people who are suffering ignorance. But because the bliss of Brahman has been revealed to them inside of themselves, they can't help but be lighthearted It's one of those combinations of things that only Mother Durga can make coexist, which is Durga means difficult, hard. It's hard for to bring together certain things, but she manages it perfectly. Lives in the body only as its witness. So we already spoke about that. Knows the self via study of the sacred scriptures. So that's Shruti. Hearing the scriptures is extremely important to the Vedantas and to yogis and the Samkhya yogis and Tantrists too. All religions really, scripture is extremely important. We have to make sure not to misunderstand that as being just mere words. Mere words fall lower at the apara vidya level. Those words that you do commerce with the world with, make money, and talk, and so forth. Talk, music, all those things. Shankara is a bit seriously down on those because those can take over life. So we want the mind to be always fixed on Brahman. That's samadhana, actually. We just mentioned that. The mind's meditation on Brahman alone. We're working our way down the list. Stay with me here. Feels no identification with body and senses. Body is to be given its due. Jesus, probably the best teaching on the body in the whole world of religion is from Jesus. He called it a temple. So that's, of course, an ideal. Turn the body into a temple. And the senses do need to be made pure by thoughts on reality. Sees no difference between Brahman and the world. So that's a mouthful, as we say here, because at first the practitioner must make the distinction between Brahman and its Maya, between Purusha and Prakriti, between God and Mammon, between the wheat and the chaff, between the real and the unreal, between the essential and the non-essential. You can go on forever calling up these dualities that form the main premise for embarking on a spiritual path. If you have not made that one essential, crucial separation of the real and the unreal, then you probably are not on the spiritual path yet. You only think you are. That's how serious they are about consulting the scriptures and seeing the difference by the explanation of the seers and sages and saints that Brahman and the world are different. I think for people who are wanting to find the basis for everything, then the way to think about that is the world has come out of the mind. And of course, the mind fourfold is there within the Atman as one of its powers. It's the projecting power. It belongs to the Divine Mother and the projecting power of it all. So it's not that the world does not have an existence. It just doesn't exist devoid of Brahman. So in that way, it makes its appearance atop of Brahman, you might say. It remains the same at all times. What does the Jivanmukti state? It remains the same, and the Jivanmukti remains with it the same at all times. Again, back to that word Tulya, equal in all matters and all things. Into whom enjoyments enter like vast rivers. When Shankara has exhausted all the ways of explaining it to you in high philosophical terms, he'll begin to turn poetic on you, like the Upanishads. So all of a sudden you've got these metaphors and these beautiful images to envision and meditate upon, like a sorrowless ocean of light. Jyotishmata, you see, it's a shoka, Jyotishmata. So you have a sorrowless ocean of light to meditate upon. And that would also help when you see an illumined soul eating, drinking, sleeping, going, coming, so forth, as the question always comes up in the Uddhava Gita and other scriptures, that makes the illumined soul look like everyone else, then What's the difference there? All those things are entering into the soul, the Jivanmukta, and disappearing and dissolving there like vast rivers into this one great ocean. So that being lives in the ocean. It is the ocean, and the rivers coming into it are these nadis, we call them, and carrying different things and that dissolve there. Everything is soluble or made soluble into Brahman. Is what the teaching of Sri Krishna did. Is free from worldliness and its effects. Probably not even need to mention that, but he puts it in. At this point, we've already been very impressed, we can tell you, by all of these things that form the nature and character of the Jivanmukta. It sees indivisible oneness at all times, despite the appearances of variances that are going on in other people's minds. I'd say that's probably in nature fairly easy to see, as they advise you to meditate in a quiet place of nature. But amongst people, it's much harder to do that. And as anyone who works with people knows, the ignorance that's in nature is just kind of an insentient thing. So it's not that hard to lift off of. It's just pretty much getting over the beauty of it and going find the gardener instead of focusing only on the garden, as Sri Krishna said. But with people, the insentience there is a mixed or skewed intelligence. Sri Krishna calls those kinds of beings alpameda in the Gita, of tiny intelligence. So what tiny intelligence there might be there in unawakened souls is being mixed in with all the experiences of their life. If you go and look at the Nidanas of Buddhism, you'll find out more about those conditionings that they talk about that give rise to a series of, say, 3 lifetimes in ignorance that you have to try and awaken from. So some words about that. So via revealed scriptures is free from the 5 sheaths. He mentions how consulting the scriptures, some of which he wrote himself, as we saw at the top of this class, causes you to loosen your hold on these 5 sheaths. Body, energy, mind, intellect, and ego are the 5 coverings over the Atman. The Atman took those on. Most Atmans like Shankara, beings like Shankara, of course, knew they took them on and cast them away, saw through them right away. I think he probably did it at 5 or 6 years old. If he didn't, he came into the body, of course, in that case. But once you're aware of Maya beginning to gather, the clouds of Maya beginning to gather about you, and which is a whole other teaching about Maya, then you begin deflecting those. And you do that by your knowledge of previous lifetimes. The dire problem of Vishmriti is there. You see, that's faulty memory. And there are ways in which you can get rid of that faulty memory. And I'll talk about that next Sunday in the class here at SRV on particles of streaming intelligence, if you want to look in on that. It's free from caste, laws, blood ties, and name and form. You might call that another 5-fold set of Maya's evolutes. Ceases to follow the world, the body, and the various dogmas that are being proposed. Shankara's teacher's teacher, again, no beginner or slouch in explaining non-duality and how, and its superior level of dealing with everything. Dogmas could not reach it. They were thrown out. And the world and the body, of course, were seen to be a part of the changing Maya, so Brahman doesn't change. Those do. So to make a Siddhanta there is really not that difficult. Penultimately, we have who has made the intellect one with Brahman. the one before that too, who sees Brahman in the sentient and the insentient. And so that we don't fall victim to thinking that's a contradiction. Yes, the Brahman is in the insentient too, as an underlying substratum. Everything appears on its surface, like a dancer has to have a stage, but nobody's looking at the stage. They're all looking at the dancer. So in that way, if she didn't have a stage to dance upon, then there would be no performance. And the onlookers would desert the premise. So that's an important thing to understand, that you're, according to our Holy Mother, Sri Sharda, she said that you must take very, very good care of everything that's in your possession. The whole teaching about caretaking. She saw you throw a broom down after cleaning with it. She said, "Oh no, put that where it belongs. Save it for the next job. Treat it with reverence." So since you see Brahman in everything, then you can see Brahman in the high and the low, the rich and the poor, in those who have realized the Atman and those who haven't. It's a very powerful teaching that is, I might say, the hidden compassion in Vedanta, which is more known for its non-duality than for its bhakti. That would be the case of Shankara's scriptures too, but you always see him saluting the Lord and writing great, wonderful scriptures and bhajans, stotrams actually, like Mohamudgara, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam. All of that exudes out of the Jivanmukta. As Shankar used to say, my devotion is to discrimination, because the discriminating wisdom got rid of my ignorance, and then I could love the Lord. But before that, if ignorance is still there, well, you see people trying to love the Lord in all different religions and all different walks of life. They're not having a very good time with it quite often. Whereas that pure, unfettered, unalloyed love. So that's why we start off with this discriminating wisdom called Vivek. Well, we do have one there. It's made the intellect one with Brahman. I already explained that. The intellect first goes into the ego, and the ego into the witness. But the refined intellect is a very powerful tool, and very precious to the Vedantas and to those who are going beyond the intellectual frame of reference, which science hasn't done yet. And finally, there, to end this column of descriptions of Jivanmukti by Shankara, who, seeing reality, has almost forgotten duality. It might be said that duality never really existed for that soul, particularly when they had that initial opening into light. And there again, by this list we saw earlier, that whether they're in the body or whether they're beyond the body, they're always in that state of Jivanmukta, which is a state that's always at hand. It, according to him, just gets covered over by avarana and vikshepa, by covering power of Maya and by the distorting power of Maya. Call those tamas and rajas if you like. Well, I'm not sure of my time right now. I could move on with more teachings on Shankara. So quite easy to do. Maybe I could, if there's a few minutes, I could show you this chart here on what the Jivanmukta has actually attained, other than this list that we've already had. And that would be the true meaning of Moksha. They also call that Mukti. So there you see at the top that beautiful teaching from the Avadhuta Gita, which is another very powerful non-dual scripture of India. These are the kind of scriptures you like to look for, which are just all essence. And sometimes it's good to have a storyline in scripture, like the Katha Upanishad, where it hangs together and people are held to it and understand it easier. But sometimes you want to hear just the words of non-dual truth. It is possible to do that through great scriptures like the Advaita Gita. So there you see at the top, I'll say it in Sanskrit for you. Sadanga natunai vishudam, manaso guru padesha natunai vishudam. And mano vinasham natunai vishudam. It means basically the soul cannot get illumined by the sixth limb yoga. It cannot be illumined by bowing at the Guru's feet. Cannot be illumined by destroying the waves of the mind, because it's already illumined. So that gives you one of the best looks into the definition of the word moksha, which of course the Jivanmukta has accomplished or has realized, that probably that we ever have. So you put great scriptures like Bhagavad Gita together with Shankara's Vivekananda, and you would come upon obvious keys like that to your own deeper understanding. And I'd say, if you're seeing the whole chart, you can see the bottom. There's from Shankara's own words. Mukti or moksha is not to be considered a state or experience yet to come. It is the eternal condition of the self, which is nothing other than Brahman. So it's a state always at hand, is how we conclude that in fewer words. I remember my own teacher, Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj, peace and bliss be upon him always, saying that he didn't care for a post-mortem emancipation. He was sitting in front of his Western congregation there and at the Vedanta Society in Oregon there, and occasionally that would come out of his mouth, because he was speaking to people who were thinking in terms of going to heaven after death. And whereas, of course, that's possible and probable for many souls, heaven is not a very high attainment, according to India's star swamis. So you want to go beyond the heaven-seeking senses and so forth, as the Svetashvatara Upanishad says. So he would sometimes put that to us in those words. I do not care for a post-mortem emancipation. It meant he wants his freedom right now, not later after death. Because after death, who knows what's going to happen in your next birth, how many veils of Maya are going to fall, how many hidden karmas are going to all of a sudden be born again and put coverings in front. So once you have this knowledge, you've heard it, now is the time to realize it in this very lifetime. That's a Jivanmukta, a living, liberated soul. They took a bull by the horns, as we say here in the West, and while the getting was good, they got going, is another expression we use here. So basically, you have this denial of an experience yet to come. That looks like, to us, like just everyday phenomena. Like, oh, I'm living in the present. Some people will say to us, but then I'll respond to them, oh, you should live in the eternal moment, not the present. Because the present is one of the three phases of time called past, present, and future. That chart we just looked at, one of the characteristics there of the Jivanmukta was that they were living beyond the past, present, and future. So the present then is this time, day by day, that we're using or utilizing, or hoping, making some use of, or wasting, as the case may be, spiritually speaking. So we want to realize the here and now in the eternal moment. There are 6 eternal gates to the eternal moment in yoga. It's a very beautiful teaching. Starts off with time and increments of time, particles of time, and so forth. But this is a return to something that's eternal. It's not the birth of something new. There's nothing new under the sun. That's how that was put by a few Christian mystics and so forth, that they realized the eternity of everything. Brahman's eternal, the soul, Atman's eternal, nature is eternal, and we just found out the very first characteristic of Maya is that it too is eternal. So that's what's chasing us down the hallway towards liberation. It's behind us. It should be behind us, but we should realize that it has an end. Shankara says in Jivanmukti, it has an end in Moksha. So here's Moksha and Mukti spread out before you, as described by one of the great swamis of the Ramakrishna order. Basically, I read an article and saw so many beautiful things in it and put a chart together from it. And we just have just enough moments, if you hold on to your hats or your coats or your dhotis or your saris or whatever it is that you're wearing today, hold on to it as we zoom through these. You could see that when I'm starting at the middle of the chart, Mukti is not liberation from bondage, because bondage doesn't exist. So you cannot start out on a dual footing in Advaita. In truth, actually, you can't start out on a dual footing. You can't get to the infinite through the finite, my teacher used to say. You have to realize that the finite never existed, because if you think you're getting to the infinite through the finite, you have to think that the finite is somehow real. But that goes against all the teachings in India. So mukti is not liberation from bondage. It's a state always at hand. What do we mean by that? It's not freedom which is produced or generated. It's the nature of your true self, your true being. So if you try and get freedom from the senses, freedom from passions like lust, anger, greed, envy, jealousy, pride, the illusion, the six passions they call them, or try and get freedom from nature, or freedom from desire, freedom from sin, all of these things do not have any real substance of their own, because Maya doesn't have any real substance. So your mind is in Maya. Trying to get rid of Maya is kind of the conclusion they draw. So you should probably give up thinking in terms of production, generation, creation, and think more in terms of, shall I give you a precious English word, non-origination. That's called ajati in Sanskrit. One of the great teachings of Shankara's teacher, Gaudapada, was ajati bhava, the path of those who are in knowledge of non-dual truth all the time. They're unborn. I have no birth, I have no death, Shankara says, because I was never born. I have no father and mother because I was never born. So that's the real truth of the matter. The rest is in Maya. So Maya is okay. It's a statement of fact, as I said earlier. If you know it and recognize it, it can be as it is, but your enlightenment is completely distinct from that in Vedanta. So number two there, as we come to the end, is it's not a result of evolution, development, or transformation. I think one of the great problems with the Western philosopher, that those that I've read, like Kant and Hegel and Sartre and so forth, is that there's this one little rub in the thing for Indian truth, for non-duality, for Advaita, is that they cannot get over this idea that something in existence doesn't transform. That's a stumbling block for so many Western philosophers to understand Advaita of Gaudapada. Something that doesn't transform, that doesn't make sense to them. See? But certain souls have realized that changeless, and then they've come back to write great commentaries on it, like Gaudapada and Shankara did. So that's an important one. I'm going to go on to 3 and 4 without giving you more teachings on 2, because we're coming to the end of time here, and we want to get to some questions, I think. So it's not something to be attained. That's again a kind of a stumbling block for the Western practitioner, maybe even for the Eastern or Middle Eastern practitioner. They think that they have to attain something. Remember back early in the class, I was talking about the rain cloud of virtues, how they're already all in you. They're not out there to go searching for. You'll probably spend a lot of time trying and maybe a lot of time failing. But if you realize their nature is within you, like the kingdoms of heaven are within you, then you'll have a much quicker time at coming to the correct conclusion. So not something to be attained means that it's the very nature of the soul. That's why the quote at the top there, soul is not purified by bowing at the Guru's feet and destroying the mind's wave in meditation and so forth, because it's always pure. If you start with that one premise, then everything after that is a matter of breath and freedom. In breath, held breath, out breath, kumbhaka and freedom. What Vivekananda was to say, if you understand this, you should be able to become a yogi in 6 months, he said. In this world, that's a short time. So creation, we like to call that projection. And attainment, we like to call that something within the soul. So, education is the manifestation of knowledge that's already in the soul. So that's something to be meditated on deeply and for some time, maybe 6 months. Number 4, and finally, it's not something to be realized via purification, which is, of course, the mistake the fire-darting reformers make, according to Vivekananda when he came west and saw the state of our religion here. It's not something to be realized via purification because the soul is ever pure and never bound. Ever free, never bound is a phrase he coined for that. So this has been a quick, for me anyway, I don't know for you, but a quick hour on Shankara's scriptures, briefly, the 10 characteristics of Maya, and then what a Jivanmukta has attained is of his very nature, and also what the meaning of liberation truly is, as opposed, or call it freedom, if you will. What freedom truly is, as opposed to what a lot of people are thinking about as freedom nowadays, like freedom from work, freedom from war, freedom of a vacation, freedom from this and that. We have to look deeper at that, because that was one of Vivekananda's favorite English words. So here I think I will close in a timely way and pass it back to our wonderful host.
Thank you, Babaji. Pranam, Sashtang Dandavata once again for very enlightening lecture. There are a few questions. I will take the questions to you with your permission. Question number 1 is, Babaji, how should one's journey to lead salvation, moksha, in this birth can be attained through?
Well, according to Swami Vivekananda, he liked to call the 4 yogas the new religion of the sage. We know those, of course, as the yogas of devotion and knowledge, meditation and action. So I think even one of those yogas, well practiced, would provide us with a way towards maybe coalescing 2 or 3 or 4 in one lifetime. If a Jivanmukta, of course, would have possession of these 4 yogas, would have realization of them all, including karma yoga, he came back to the earth so that it could help others. So that's a kind of karma yoga. He's at least going into the atmosphere of people who are karmis, who are trying to get realization through works and actions. We know how critical Shankara is sometimes in his scriptures about not that, hundreds and thousands of asanas and millions of children and endless works do not get you enlightenment. So there has to be some sort of new understanding in us, maybe coalescing another yoga or 2 in the picture for us in our practice. And I do have students writing me from India and asking me how to increase their sadhana. Most of them tell me that they're just doing some asana and breathing in the morning. So from there, I take them and I ask them, please study the scriptures and with a teacher, and then increase your meditation time so that all 4 yogas are getting equal attention by you. I think that's probably a short answer for a very good question about how to fulfill your dharmic destiny, to fulfill your swadharma.
Thank you. The next question is, you mentioned 10 traits of Jivanmukta. Is there any way by which one can prioritize these traits,
What's the word there?
or maybe put it in some importance sequence? This is most important. This is relatively second in priority, third in priority, or something like, or all are simultaneous.
Which word were you using? I didn't
Uh,
understand the.
10 traits of Jivanmukta. You gave 10 traits of Jivanmukta.
Oh, tricks. You're saying tricks.
Traits, yeah. I'm sorry for pronunciation.
No wonder I was thrown off. I think they're more as accomplishments or something, but
Yes,
yeah, they're tricks against Maya. You're true.
yeah.
Uh,
So there is no question of prioritization. All are simultaneous.
well, usually the list I put together there on those charts were the order in which they appeared in the scriptures, but I've noticed that that's not necessarily the order in which they appear in people's minds.
Okay.
They have, they have to when they're following the path, they have to use their intelligence, their discrimination, and find out which one is going to be the best to use first against any particular obstacle or granti, any kind of knot. Because there are knots in their bodies and there are knots in their prana, and knots in their thinking process are called grantis. So I think that's where a spiritual teacher comes in very handy if you can consult them, plus the scriptures. This is a Shankara teaching. You have the three great boons, right? You have a aparokshanubhuti, your own direct experience, but then that has been gotten by Vidya Shastra, studying the wisdom of the scriptures, and those two are based in your teacher. You see how they call that Guru Anusashana, I think, based in your teacher. So those three are very important for clarifying those matters.
I think in past 20, 22 days, whatever it might be number of days, and every session, this is the most common question. It comes again and again to every, say, person, guru give, or every person giving lecture here. Is it how important is to have a guru to understand all these traits, and how to find the guru?
Well, I'm a Westerner, and I grew up in a society that's arrogant and dominating. I don't know why Mother favored me the way she did to lead me to Swami Sheshanandaji right there across the river when I was living in the city of Portland, and brought me to my knees in front of a Jivanmukta, in front of a living liberated soul. But I count my blessings every day for that having happened to me, because pride, of course, and arrogance is the thing that will keep you out of God's kingdom more than anything else. So I think Swamiji Vivekananda, whose image is there behind me with Mother Kali, said it very nicely. And he said, I'm paraphrasing here, he said, you can go to the top of the Himalayas or the Caucasus, you can go to the Sahara Desert or the Gobi Desert, you can go to the bottom of the ocean, but you'll never be able to get enlightenment until you have a guru.
Thank you. One last question. According to Advaita, how can one eliminate the illusion and misconception of the society which is driven by unproductive expenditure?
Yes, well, the problem, you said expenditure, right?
Yeah, unproductive expenditure.
Unproductive, yeah. I think until, again, the ego is turned ripe and one has surrendered themselves to the divine ideal, maybe to the Ishtam, that all expenditure is unproductive. I don't think money is evil. It's the people who use it, the minds that use it, is where the evil comes from. So I think that's the hidden teaching in the yogic yama aparigraha, isn't it? Because most people think here in the West we get that described as not giving of gifts, but we have Christmas here and things like that. You see, so it's just not making sense to them why they shouldn't be giving gifts to people. But if you're a yogic practitioner, you come across a teaching that your parents in this culture routed you towards the eternal money making as soon as you were born. They had everything planned for you. You know, they wanted you to go to school, get a job, make money, support them at the end of their lives. All of that was what's called conventional living. But it's very good of Patanjali and yoga to bring it out that that's why how you forget your past lifetimes. It's that Sanskrit word vismriti, right? Vismriti. You forget all your past lifetimes. It's a dire problem that we're born after having spent lifetimes of gathering knowledge and other things, that we're born in the next lifetime totally forgetful of them. And we have to start all over again. This is a description of samsara to me. This is my own personal description of what makes the wheel of samsara go around. Because people are being routed towards the eternal money making, to quote Vivekananda. So yeah, money making has its place, but Brahman first. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, if you line up a bunch of zeros and add them up, they add up to nothing. But if you put a 1 in front of those zeros, you've got a huge number. He was talking about everything in life missing Brahman, void of Brahman is the zeros. But you put that 1 in front of it, your whole life gets fulfilled. And you don't just get pleasure, you get exquisite pleasure. And then beyond that, you'll get the bliss of Brahman.
Thank you, Babaji. We are extremely grateful to you for enlightening us on this complex subject of Jivanmukti. Thank you once again in Sashtanga Dandavati.